Spain is still celebrating their World Cup triumph, but let's be honest, that trophy already feels like old news. The real story is unfolding right now. Did Spain's win actually save possession football? Can Argentina survive the departure of their legends without collapsing? And with Zidane in France, Klopp in Germany, and a dozen other seismic coaching changes, who's actually building something that could shake up 2030? Oh, and FIFA might blow this whole thing up to 64 teams, maybe giving China a real shot. This is Sideline Story. I'm Yang Guang with Tianyu and Brandon Yates. Stick around and hit subscribe so you don't miss a single take. Drop a comment which storyline gets you fired up. Let's go. Now, Spain dominated the tournament with a familiar possession-based style. It reminds me of Chinese commentator Dong Lu's famous remarks 4 years ago after Spain were knocked out by Morocco. He actually announced that possession football is harmful and declared the style was down. And he wasn't alone. I guess pundits across the globe made similar predictions. And in recent years, it seems like the transition-based, fast and direct football is taking over the spotlight, represented by clubs like PSG.
Yeah.
Tianyu, this deserves a second thought. Does Spain's World Cup win mean possession football is back, or are we reading too much into one team's magic?
Well, for me, I think that argument that possession football is dead is a little bit too absolute. For me personally, I've never believed that possession football was dead, but rather I would say it's becoming something almost every team has added to its toolbox. I mean, for the traditional powerhouses, I think keeping possession means controlling the tempo. They decide when to, speed the game up and when to slow it down. It also helps them win games without, spending too much energy chasing the balls. And for smaller to medium level teams, I think possession can actually be a form of defense. Because if you keep the ball, you're forcing your opponent to defend instead of constantly attacking you. So it's almost less exhausting than sitting deep in a low block for 90 minutes. So no, I don't think possession football is dead. I mean, I think it's no longer a style that belongs to just one or two teams, because nowadays almost everyone also focuses on transitions and counterbacks, like you said. But possession is still a basic skill every team needs. If you can't keep the ball under your feet, sooner or later you will lose control of the game. So the World Cup final between Spain and Argentina was actually a perfect example of that. I think Argentina are one of the best transition teams in the world. But how can you counterattack if you can hardly ever get the ball?
Yeah.
So they managed only 2 shots the whole game and didn't even get one on target.
35% ball possession.
Yes, that's kind of humiliating, and that tells you everything. I mean, possession isn't something teams can simply abandon anymore. I think it's becoming part of the modern football. And now if we're talking about possession as a team's main identity, I think that's a different story. Because to play that kind of football, you're going to need a technical midfield. But also, that's not enough. I think your defenders also have to be very comfortable on the ball. That's exactly why this Spain team could play the way they did. I think everyone talks about Rodri, Pedri, and Fabian Ruiz and Olmo. I would actually give more credit to Kubasi and Laporte. Their passing and the ability to just to carry the ball out from the backs allowed Spain to move the ball smoothly throughout the entire tournament. So without defenders like that, I think it's almost impossible to build a possession-heavy team.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Possession game is not just one style anymore. It's an ingredient that can be mixed up with other styles. But I guess Spain's possession game is just another level.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just depending on one or two players. The whole team is like a machine that gets possession game into 3 points or the World Cup trophy. Yes, I guess Spain's game is now not purely tiki-taka. It also emphasizes more on, physical intensity and high pressing. I guess tactic-wise, it's even an upgrade from the 2010 Spain. But at its core, I guess Spain's tactical foundation is still possession game. I mean, to be honest, some of their games still felt kind of boring to watch with so many back and forth passes. So, Brandon, is this actually a sustainable and replicable tactic that other national teams can adopt, or was it uniquely tailored to this specific generation of Spanish talent?
Look, I think other teams can adopt it, but not to the same degree that Spain can, because this sort of possession football is in their DNA. It's how the players are raised and how they are taught to play when they are coming through systems. And I think that it's definitely not an upgrade in terms of talent. I think that the kind of class of 2010, for example, is one of the greatest teams or collection of footballers that the world has ever seen. But I think that the way that the style of football has evolved, like you mentioned, Yang Guang, the tactics has been something that's been really beneficial to this group of Spanish players, because again, the possession football has been really impressive, but what they've done with it and sort of the variety that they've added to it has also been very impressive. I mean, like Tian, you mentioned as well, the defenders Kubarasi and Laporte also deserve a lot of credit, not just for their defensive steel, but for their confidence and calmness on the ball. And for Kubarasi, who I believe is 19, is just an immense performance and seems like a real talent, and deservingly one young player of the tournament, if I'm not mistaken. But I think what also benefits Spain at this point in time is that they offer quite a lot down the wings as well. Of course, we know, starting with the wing backs, Cucurella and Pedro Porro also created a lot of trouble with their, first of all, their defensive abilities, but also their constant running up and down the flanks and what they are able to do with the ball and the speed that they possess and the creativity that they possess. I think also sort of drew Argentina out wide and created more space for Spain down the middle. And then, of course, Lamine Yamal. And then when Nico Williams was introduced, I think they also absorbed a lot of the attention from Argentina's defense, which was, at some parts of the game, pretty barbaric, even after the game. I mean, players like Paredes should be feeling total shame and embarrassment about the way that they handled themselves on the world's biggest stage. But, what that did was create space down the middle for people like Oyarzabal to create damage, for Ferran Torres to score that fantastic goal. And if it wasn't for Emi Martinez, I think that, it could have been a much more embarrassing result for Argentina. So just in terms of that possession football, yes, it's definitely not dead, but I think that the way that it's implemented will change. You can't just hold onto it for as long as possible and hope for the best. You really have to figure out a way to utilize it and also have sort of not a plan B, but other players on the pitch that offer something more than just possession, which I think Spain do have in Lamine Yamal, Cucurella, Nico Williams when he plays, Pedro Porro. So all of these players that can also kind of expand the game and also create chances down the flanks.
All right. Now let's switch things to the runners-up. Argentina reaching the final was already kind of a miracle, at least to me. But the bigger question is what happens next. It's safe to say it's Messi's last World Cup, and a bunch of key veteran players like Otamendi, Paredes, De Paul, Tagliafico, Emiliano Martinez. So after their departure, how will things look for Argentina? Tianyu, are you optimistic?
Well, obviously not really. I think, first of all, Messi's departure is going to be a huge loss. I think this clearly isn't a one-man team anymore, but Messi still brings something nobody else can. I mean, he's the captain, the leader, and he's the kind of player who can just suddenly change a game with one pass or just one strike when the team is under pressure. So that's obviously not very easy to replace. And then, like you said, look at the veterans, players like De Paul, Tagliafico, and Otamendi. They will be gone by the next World Cup as well. I think they may not have the same legs they had in 2022, but they still bring a lot of experience, leadership, and simply composure on the pitch.
And a lot of fouls.
Yeah, a lot of fouls as well. And I think those qualities matter a lot in knockout football. But that doesn't mean Argentina will suddenly just be reduced to an average team. I think they still have a bunch of outstanding players like Alvarez, Martinez, Enzo Fernandez, and McAllister. I think the talent is definitely there. But I think leadership and tournament experience aren't things you can easily replace overnight. I still expect Argentina to remain one of the strongest sides in the world, but I think their dominance will be far from the dominance they showed this generation. There will largely, very likely, be a transition period before the next generation team really takes shape.
Right. I think this World Cup gave us some clues what Argentina would look like without Messi in 4 years. And it's not pretty. I mean, they don't have attacking threats out wide. There are no genuine wingers on this squad and no flair in the final third. There are 2 fullbacks. They worked very hard, but let's be honest, they were far from real game changers.
Yeah,
I expect Argentina to drop to second tier nation in terms of football 4 years from now. It reminds me of Germany's decline after that golden generation retired one after another, the same kind of leadership vacuum and the same kind of loss of identity. That's a very worrying comparison for Argentina. And if you think about Argentina after Maradona retired, they experienced decades long of silence in World Cup. Brandon, in this post-Messi era, are we going to see a painful transition period for Argentina? If yes, how long do you expect that period would last?
The decline is, to be expected and should be pretty obvious. But I think for Argentina, it will be quite a harsh one because they don't seem to have that much exciting talent coming through as of yet. I think that they still are, first of all, a huge country. And of course, football is their number one sport. And next to Brazil, they've definitely been the most successful South American side over the course of footballing history. So I think that, they will bounce back, and I think they will continue to produce maybe not the Messi level footballers, but they will continue to produce talented footballers. So I think the immediate drop will probably be quite shocking, but I also think that they could potentially bounce back quite quickly just because of the amount of talent that a nation like that can produce. But I think that with just away from the football side of things, just the sort of emotional side of things, losing a player like Messi, the effect that has on a footballing federation and the fans and all of that sort of thing, I think bouncing back from that just mentally is equally hard as trying to replace a player like that.
I read a comment online someday, and it's a father saying it's his son's first World Cup and he fell in love with Argentina. And it's very hard for him to tell his son it's the best Argentina in the foreseeable future, at least for 10 years. Moving on, the 2026 World Cup didn't just eliminate teams, it triggered a seismic shift in the coaching landscape. Didier Deschamps stepped down after 14 years with France. His replacements, reportedly Zinedine Zidane, and Jurgen Klopp is taking over from Julian Nagelsmann for Germany. Slaven Bilic returns to Croatia. Diego Forlan is now the interim coach of Uruguay, and Portugal and Belgium also replaced their coaches. Italy is reportedly sounding out the possibility of land Pep Guardiola. That's crazy. A new generation of managers is taking over. Tianyu, what do these changes mean for the 2030 World Cup and beyond?
First of all, personally, I'm really excited to see what kind of changes Jurgen Klopp can bring to this German squad. I think Germany have been too focused on trying to play possession-heavy football for too long. I mean, I think it just hasn't suited the players they have. I mean, like we said, Spain can dominate the ball because they have the kind of technical players who are comfortable with the ball under their feet.
The right players.
Yes. But, I mean, Germany also have a bunch of talents like Musiala, Florian Wirtz, and Kimmich. But I think their biggest strength has never been
possession.
Endless passing. I think you know it very well. Traditionally, Germany have been at their best when they're playing with intensity, when they are pressing hard, and when they are attacking quickly once they win the ball back. So that's exactly the kind of football that Jurgen Klopp loves. I think his high pressing and fast transitions feel like a much better fit for this group of players. And if we can bring back that kind of aggressive Germany identity, I think they could become a real title contender by 2030. And also, apart from that, yeah, Zinedine Zidane is another very interesting appointment. I think Zidane, as we know, has always been a coach that's excellent at managing superstar players. And more importantly, he commands a lot of respect in the dressing room for everything he achieved in his player career. So when someone like Zidane tells superstar players like Mbappe, Dembele, or Olise what their role is, I think they are far more likely to just accept it. And what I'm most curious about is how he will balance the attacking talent. Because we know France have so many world-class forwards that keeps everyone happy is not easy. So I think, will he build the team around one star, or will he create a more balanced system where everyone can contribute? That remains a question mark. So overall, I think these coaching changes could make international football much more unpredictable. New ideas, new systems, and new personalities always bring, fresh storylines. So that would make the road to the 2030 World Cup even more exciting.
Right. Personally, I'm quite excited about Klopp's appointment with Germany. I mean, he's known for lifting the struggling sides into champions at the club level, and I'm hoping he can work the same magic on the international level. What I really miss is the old Germany, like you said, that side played with, intensity and swagger, and the club's rock and roll philosophy might just be the answer to bring that identity back. But I don't expect results immediately. It takes time, but 2030 sounds about the right time for him to get this Germany team really mature under him. Brandon, which of these projects feel like a right fit and which are destined to fail to you in 2030? Maybe some of them will become world champions?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to determine at this point in time. I think the obvious ones are, Zidane at France and Jurgen Klopp at Germany. I just think that, having two legends that are from those nations, coaching those nations, I think is very good for both of them. I mean, obviously with Klopp, it's different, not a great player, but an amazing manager, whereas Zidane was one of the greatest midfielders of all time and one of the most successful Champions League managers of all time in particular. So I think for France, it was kind of an obvious appointment, and I think it was something that Zidane was probably waiting for, because I think he also must have had a lot of offers from clubs that would have been very tempting. The appointment that will bring the most immediate success, I think, will probably be Zidane with France, because I still think that, France's display against Spain in the semis was very confusing, and if they had gotten to the final, I think they would have absolutely destroyed Argentina. And I still think that Spain overcoming France was actually more of a World Cup victory than their win over Argentina. With Zidane and the experience that he has and the respect that he commands as a former player and a coach, and with just all of the talent that France has, I think, that's a very scary prospect for any other team around the world. And it's also probably going to really excite the players, which, managerial appointments very rarely do these days. It normally brings a lot more fear than excitement, whereas I think that all of the players within that French squad and the German squad, to be fair, I think will be excited with those appointments.
Right. Still about 2030, FIFA is planning to further expand the World Cup to 64 teams at the next edition. What was just a thought months ago is now being seriously discussed by FIFA's vice president and the president of South American Football's Confederation. Theoretically, a 64-team tournament allows for 16 groups of 4 teams. This eliminates the confusing best third-placed system currently used in the 48-team format. It means teams won't play extra games, still 8 games for the last 4, but organizers need to host more games, 128 to be specific. Tianyu, is this a realistic idea?
I actually think the current 48-team format has already shown that expansion can work. I mean, before the tournament, a lot of people expected too many one-sided games where, the powerhouses would easily crush the smaller teams. But it's actually not the case. We saw Cape Verde, which is the smallest country in the tournament by population, and they managed to draw with Spain, and they pushed eventual finalist Argentina to their limits. and their 40-year-old goalkeeper Vozinha became one of the stories of the tournament. He's valued at only 50,000 euros, but he showed once again that transfer values doesn't decide what happens at the World Cup. And there are also a bunch of other African teams making an impact. We saw DR Congo earn a draw against Portugal and gave England a very difficult game. And apart from that, Norway made an incredible run and became one of the biggest surprise packages by knocking out Brazil. So I think these stories are exactly what makes the World Cup special. I think if the 48-team format has already produced so many diversity without hurting the quality too much, then I don't think the idea of a 64-team tournament is unrealistic. I mean, of course, FIFA has to deal with issues like scheduling, travel, and player workload, of course, is a very important issue because these are real concerns. But from a football fan's perspective, I think giving more countries the chance to compete in the world's biggest stages, I mean, there would be more stories, more styles of football, and simply more unforgettable moments. For fans, that's something many people would enjoy watching.
So you are suggesting that the 64-team World Cup will generate more Cape Verdes?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Right. Brandon, if you are in Infantino's shoes, should you immediately expand to 64 next time, or do we need to calm down a little bit to continue the 48-team experiment?
I think if I was in Infantino's shoes and all of the criticism that he's been facing lately, I wouldn't do anything immediately. I think that I would hire, I wouldn't even, leave my house immediately. I think I would make every move a very calculated decision, especially after such a major tournament like the World Cup. But look, I think Infantino is just a figurehead. I'm sure he's got a team of like 30 or 40 accountants and media people and all of these sort of things that kind of essentially make decisions for him. Yeah, look, I think that it is something that they are definitely going to consider, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea at all. I think that, like, Tian, you mentioned, I think that this extended format of the World Cup has proven to be a great success. I think it's a fine line because, you do want to have as many nations representing themselves on the world stage as possible, but you also still want to make it a tournament that is like relatively difficult to qualify for. So I think that's also something that needs to be managed. We don't want to get to a point where like we have 200 nations competing in the World Cup and there's no qualification process and, just hoping for the best. So, yeah, I think that, if it continues to get expanded at a sort of reasonable and calculated rate, I think that is a great thing for world football. And I think it will also inspire many more nations around the world to take up football and to take their national team a lot more seriously. And of course, Cape Verde is the obvious answer to that. But yeah, it is definitely something that needs to be managed and also, like Tian, you mentioned as well, player welfare also really needs to be taken into consideration. So, yeah, look, I think it is a balancing act that can be managed, and I'm sure it will excite a lot of nations that didn't qualify for this World Cup, China included, and South Africa, going forward as well. I think that, it will make it easier for us to qualify in the future going forward, because qualifying for this tournament was a major success, but also an incredibly difficult journey.
Right. Since you mentioned China, let's talk about it. China failed in the 48-team plan, but if it's expanded to 64 teams, do we have a shot? Remember, the World Cup quotas for Asia might be expanded to 12 if that happens.
Yeah, I would say the chances would definitely improve. I mean, a bigger tournament means more qualification spots for Asia. So yeah, mathematically, China would have a much better opportunity than before. And more importantly, I think there have been some quite encouraging signs lately in Chinese football. I think China's under-23 team had an impressive Asian Cup run, and we're beginning to see more younger players coming through. Youth development also seems to be moving in the right direction, and one of the examples should be Li Haoyan, who officially joined Barcelona's La Masia under-15 team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think he's reportedly the first Chinese player ever to enter Barca's youth academy, which is a really encouraging milestone. And hopefully he won't be the last one.
Yeah.
And of course, I think one or two young players coming through won't change everything overnight. But developing a strong national team takes a lot of time. And China still has a lot of work to do in terms of coaching, youth development, and player development. But I would say at least the direction is on the right track. I think it just feels more positive than ever before. And if younger players continue to develop and the youth systems continue to improve, then maybe a 64-team World Cup could finally give China the chance to end more than 20 years of waiting and just help us return to football's biggest stages.
Like what you said, the positive sign of this trajectory must be the 2024 U23 Asian Cup, where China ended the runners-up. 4 years from now, that batch of players, including Li Hao, Wang Yudong, Bahram Abduali, Xu Bin, they will be hitting their prime. It will be a very hopeful Chinese team that could bring the World Cup dream into reality for us 4 years from now. All right, after an incredible month and a half of football, we already can't wait for 2030. Let's see what stories that tournament will tell. With that, we end this episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Sideline Story and leave your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, you can also check our website at radio.cgtn.com. Until next time, stay on the sidelines with us.